It's time for Operation Freedom with your host, Dr. Dave Janda, on Southeast Michigan's conservative powerhouse, Wham Talk 1600.
Welcome back to Operation Freedom, folks. I'm Dr. Dave Janda, broadcasting from Derek's in our Freedom Bunker at Wham Talk 1600. I'm in the ancillary bunker because, as I've mentioned before, Colonel Klink Whitmer, the incompetent overseer of POW Michigan, has determined that 99% of citizens in our state are non-essential. So we are not to be on the roads without our, quote, papers, end quote. If we are caught on the roads without our papers showing that we're essential, that we are subject to a $1,000 fine and 90 days in prison. I kid you not. If you would have told me this would be happening 6 months ago, I'd say, she's off, but she's a deep state player. Her bread is buttered by the deep state. We know that, but boy, this is beyond off the charts. And needless to say, the prisoners of war in Michigan are getting restless. And reportedly, she's now contemplating, and over the next week, whether she will bring back some of these onerous restrictions, dial them down. But yet again, when there was a protest here in Michigan this past Wednesday, she was threatening to even up in the ante further. I'm not sure how you can up the ante further. I mean, right now, one of the restrictions is if you have a relative across the street, you're not allowed to go across the street and see that relative. You can't buy any kind of landscaping material, flooring material. You can't buy paint. It's beyond off the charts. Yet, you can buy a lottery ticket. No problem. Yeah, go buy that lottery ticket. Then she had some other move this week when she was talking about elective surgeries, and they were to remain to be canceled. But abortions could continue because they were, quote, her words, not mine, that abortions are, quote, life-sustaining, end quote. You can't argue with somebody who's that out of touch. This is just beyond off the charts. A number of people were very upset with me 3 weeks ago. I called for her resignation because of what she did in blocking treatments for folks that had coronavirus, which were found to be effective at numerous medical centers around the world and in the United States, that being the utilization of hydroxychloroquine and Zithromax. We needless to say, pounded the pavement on that through our efforts on social media, through this radio show, through YouTube and the like. It took her 3 days, but she did back off on that. We have yet to find out exactly how many people died because of her decision, how many people were needlessly hospitalized who were denied the treatment because of her directive. We do not know the figures yet of how many people had to go on a ventilator and be intubated because of her just beyond onerous, I would call it evil, actually, evil directive. This is an individual who's practicing medicine without a license. And she's put every Michigan resident in harm's way. And in fact, every citizen in our country in harm's way, because every single governor around the country was watching Colonel Klink Whitmer and what she's doing here in Michigan to see what they could get away with. Because let's face it, they probably have some of their bread, at least maybe all their bread, buttered by deep state operatives. Needless to say, the people who listen to this show, who are subscribers to DaveJanda.com, without our subscribers, this show, our website, our YouTube channel would not exist. And it was our subscribers and the listeners to this radio show and to our YouTube channel who stood up and made themselves heard. And because they were heard, she backed off. And that's an example to everyone in our country of what we can do to put an end to the onerous action of many of these deep state players. President Trump has taken on a number of different entities this past week, and I want to focus on one of them, and that is the World Health Organization. He has been chastised by such individuals as Bill Gates, and we dissected Bill Gates earlier in this show with Alex Newman, and we're going to touch on him again in the next half hour with Sarah Westall. But Bill Gates was very unhappy that President Trump had decided to pull the funding, the United States funding, from the World Health Organization. We spend about $450 million of taxpayers' funds on the World Health Organization. And needless to say, the bang for the buck that we get out of that is, non-existent. And the reason why I say that is because the World Health Organization covered up the coronavirus pandemic, which started in Wuhan, China. Now, look, I've talked about this since January. In January, I was accused of being a xenophobe, that I said that the virus started in China. No, I'm not a xenophobe. I'm just correct, and have been correct for the past 3 months. The deep state trolls came after me in large numbers because I said, 1, it emanated from China. 2, it emanated from that BSL lab in Wuhan, China. And isn't it interesting that Fox News is claiming they're breaking news this past week that, Brett Baer broke it open, that this virus it's now been determined, came out of a lab in Wuhan, China. If you listen to this show for 3 months, you've known that. If you were a subscriber more than 3 months, you've known about that. And I also don't believe it was an accident. I've characterized this virus as being a freedom-stripping virus. It stopped the freedom movement that was emanating from Hong Kong, moving into mainland China. And then I believe it was willfully walked into our country by a number of different emissaries, let's call them, from China. And the result were thousands dead and millions infected. That was not an accident. It was a willful act. And one of the players that covered for China, that covered for them, that blocked information from coming forward, that could have protected every American but saved thousands of lives, one of the entities that is responsible for this pandemic worldwide and the impact it has had has been the World Health Organization. And President Trump threw down the gauntlet this week and pulled funding. This from Zero Hedge. Just as he threatened a week ago, and then was threatened back with, quote, body bags, end quote, by the head of the World Health Organization, President Trump confirmed he will halt U.S. funding for the World Health Organization while U.S. reviews virus warnings regarding China. Quote, the reality is WHO, World Health Organization, failed to obtain, vet, and share information in a timely fashion, Trump stated. Quote, he went on, the World Health Organization failed in its basic duty and must be held accountable. Tremendous amounts of time were lost because of the World Health Organization. He goes on, additionally, President Trump accused the world body of, quote, mismanaging and covering up the coronavirus and failing to obtain timely information on the virus, causing a 20-fold increase in deaths around the world. Quote, so much death was caused by the World Health Organization and their mistakes, President Trump stated. He went on, quote, one of the most dangerous and costly decisions from the World Health Organization was its disastrous decision to oppose travel restrictions from China and other nations. Fortunately, President Trump stated, I was not convinced and suspended travel from China, saving untold numbers of lives. Now, for those of you who think that, well, President Trump is, well, giving himself too much credit, I can tell you from my contacts on the inside of the White House that, in fact, President Trump was being told by a number of individuals that, well, you know, this could really harm relations with China, you blocking travel from people coming back in from China. And in fact, the World Health Organization, their chief, this guy that Alex Newman dissected as being a toy, if you will, of the Ethiopian communist government. The World Health Organization chief Tedros, very tight with Bill Gates, by the way, in early February, right after President Trump put that restriction in at January 31st, 2020, he said, quote, that widespread travel bans and restrictions weren't needed to stop the outbreak and, quote, could have the effect of increasing fear and stigma with little public health benefit, end quote. Imagine if President Trump had buckled down to Tedros, the World Health Organization, and those that were advising him to back down. And then this week it came out from Summit News, the World Health Organization blocked doctors from urging border controls to stop the spread of coronavirus. See, it's not just that they criticized President Trump in public. It's not just that they sent their emissaries to try to convince him of not doing that act on January 31st, 2020, of blocking travel from China into the United States, which I believe saved tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of American lives. Oh, no. They were involved in some pretty nefarious activities, the World Health Organization. From Summit News, the World Health Organization blocked doctors from urging countries to impose border controls to stop the spread of coronavirus. While the organization was demanding countries impose zero border controls, it was also campaigning against the profiling of international travelers in order to prevent the, quote, stigmatization, end quote, of Chinese people. WHO told countries not to impose travel bans back to the end of January, when the organization released a statement urging against any travel or trade restriction, while demanding countries not engage in discrimination in their handling of the coronavirus outbreak. In early February, Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, reiterated this in a statement in which he said that travel restrictions, quote, can have the effect of increasing fear and stigma, end quote. Right up to the end of February, the World Health Organization continued, quote, to advise against the application of travel or trade restrictions to countries experiencing coronavirus outbreaks, end quote. This was, folks, in spite of the rapid spread of the disease, not just in our country, but around the world. Now, folks, according to Summit News, it's been revealed that medical experts who were urging countries to impose border controls were, in fact, silenced by the World Health Organization. Should that surprise anybody? The World Health Organization is a deep state organization. Let's face it. They are all about silencing dissent, right? All the deep state players are. I mean, just look at Colonel Clink Whitmer's rant after those patriots protested in Lansing about the freedom-stripping agenda of Colonel Clink Whitmer in Michigan this past Wednesday. She treated every citizen in the state of Michigan like they were 4-year-olds, saying, you know what? I'm going to punish you further. I'm going to think of other restrictions that can be imposed since you spoke out against me. That should not surprise anyone. She is a deep state operative. And she's just taken her cue from her handlers in the deep state. And so is who? Anyone who speaks against what they were promoting, which was, in fact, more distribution of the disease, well, they get silenced. Let me go on with this Summit News article. Quote, the World Health Organization actually decided not to go ahead with travel ban recommendations and not declare a global health emergency, but there were a few dissenting voices. Quote, so the official meeting records say there was a divergence of views, but they won't actually go into detail about who was trying to block it. But there were doctors there who wanted to issue travel bans, and the World Health Organization blocked it. World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus also opposed Trump's late January travel ban, as stated. And I read to you what he said, quote, we reiterate our call to all countries not to impose restrictions that unnecessarily interfere with international travel and trade. Such restrictions can have the effect of increasing fear and stigma with little public health benefit, end quote. Now, of note, the U.S. has contributed approximately $450 million per year to the World Health Organization's operations. And China, that seems to run the show because there are all these pictures of good old Tedros embracing Xi, who covered up this virus and the fact that it could be spread from human to human. China essentially runs Tedros, who runs the World Health Organization. Well, China only contributes $43 million per year, which led President Trump to say, sorry, gang, we're no longer funding it. And who stepped up in opposition? All those other deep state players in the media and in the celebrities. And Bill Gates. Go back to that segment we did earlier with Alex Newman about Bill Gates. I suggest that, well, Bill Gates has billions of dollars. What's $450 million a year for him? That's haircut money. If Gates wants to fund the World Health Organization, go for it, Billy. But I give President Trump a lot of credit for throwing down the gauntlet, saying these people are useless. In fact, they're worse than useless. They've led to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of deaths around the world because of their actions, of their embrace of a cover-up in which China willfully was involved. Don't buy into this garbage that, well, China really didn't realize what they were up against with this virus. I'm sorry, folks. You are placating the technocracy movement. As we've outlined with Pat Wood, who was a guest earlier on this show, Pat is the expert on the technocracy movement, which is a movement by the deep state, and their poster child for technocracy is China. This virus was not an accident. This virus, freedom-stripping virus, stopping the freedom movement in its tracks in China, was not an accident. And this virus walking into the United States was not an accident. President Trump stepped on the accelerator even further. President Trump, this from Zero Hedge, slams the World Health Organization for kowtowing to Beijing. In what was by far his harshest criticism of the international agency to date, President Trump slammed the World Health Organization, accusing it of doing the bidding of China while taking the U.S.'s money. The World Health Organization, he stated, really blew it. For some reason, funded largely by the United States, yet very China-centric. Where we're going to be giving that a good look. He stated, "Fortunately, I rejected their advice on keeping our borders open to China early on. Why did they give us such a faulty recommendation?" And let's face it, the World Health Organization didn't declare coronavirus a pandemic until March 13th, 2020. March 13th, 2020. When there was significant evidence as far back actually as November of 2019 that there was a huge issue, a health-related issue in China. Calls mount for investigation into the World Health Organization for participating in China's coronavirus cover-up. This from Zero Hedge again. Calls are mounting for a congressional investigation into the World Health Organization's alleged role in helping China conceal the severity of the coronavirus outbreak. Florida Senator Rick Scott issued a statement demanding accountability over the World Health Organization's handling of the crisis. Here's what he said, quote, "The mission of the World Health Organization is to get public health information to the world so every country can make the best decisions to keep their citizens safe. When it comes to coronavirus, the World Health Organization failed. They need to be held accountable for their role in promoting misinformation and helping communist China cover up a global pandemic. We know communist China is lying about how many cases and deaths they have, what they knew and when they knew it. And the World Health Organization never even bothered to investigate further. Their inaction cost lives. But their actions also cost lives. Their actions of trying to dissuade individuals from talking about travel bans. Their actions in trying to influence President Trump in not instituting a travel ban. And what they did with data. Oxford-based groups stop using the World Health Organization data for coronavirus reporting, citing errors in the World Health Organization's data. Since March 18th, it became, this from John Miltmore, became unfortunately impossible to rely on the World Health Organization data to understand how the pandemic has been developing over time. Additionally, we found many errors in the data published by the World Health Organization when we went through all the data situational reports.